Each Sacramento Kings player, coach, even front office staff member has a number of significant reasons as to why this season is incredibly important for them. On today's podcast, we're going to focus specifically on Keegan Murray. Is this the last chance for Keegan to show his potential as a high-level potential two-way star in the NBA? Chris Biderman from the Sacramento Bee joins me to discuss just that right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all off-season long. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And before I dive into the topic of the day, the conversation with Chris Biderman about Keegan Murray, I do want to address something that happened at our ABC 10 station. There's been a reason why there hasn't been a podcast out for a handful of days. There was a shooting situation at our ABC 10 studio. A man or a suspect drove up and fired 3 bullets into the lobby of our building. And thankfully, no one was hurt, first and foremost. Secondly, only one person was in the lobby and they were not hurt or hit in any type of way. There is a suspect in custody, but it was a pretty weird, uncomfortable, scary, whatever word you want to use to describe situation for us at ABC 10. Thankfully, I was not there. I was not in the studio when it happened. It happened in the early afternoon, around 1:30 in the afternoon. I don't arrive to the studio until around 2:45, 3 o'clock. So thankfully, I was not there. I feel for all my colleagues who were there and had to experience that. Again, nobody was hurt. We don't know the full motives behind it. It's believed to be politically driven with everything that's going on right now. And of course, we try and use sports as a way to escape from that. And I usually don't like to address or touch on things that happen, but I wanted to address that. For those of you who have been reaching out, thank you so much. I am fine. We are fine. ABC 10 and Tegna, our parent company, because we are an affiliate of ABC. We are not owned by ABC. They're doing as best as they can to take care of all of us and make sure we're safe given the circumstances in the situation. So scary, a sign of the times right now, but also another reason to why what the Locked On Kings podcast is, the importance of sports and how sports can connect people, how I can go into the Golden One Center with almost 18,000 strangers, people from all different walks of life, but we can all bond over our love of the game of basketball or our love of the Sacramento Kings. Times like these are when sports and the community and fan bases and stuff, I think, are so unbelievably important. So thank you to everybody who reached out. We are fine, and hopefully we can just continue to live our lives as journalists and fans and media members and everything going forward from here. But now we transition out of the heavy stuff to a conversation about Keegan Murray. Chris Biderman from the Sacramento Bee, a friend of mine, has been on this show many, many times. Chris and I had a really, really interesting, good conversation about Keegan Murray and his future here in Sacramento, and if this is really his last chance to show his potential as a two-way star in the league. So let's dive into it. It's that time of year again. Chris Biderman, Sacramento Kings basketball right around the corner. I know you are excited for whatever this Chicago Bulls West full season experiment is going to be. And as we count down the days to training camp, we start to really dive in and pay attention to storylines for camp itself, storylines for this entire season, and a player that we've talked about in some capacity in the same way every single year around this time is Keegan Murray. Is this going to be the year that Keegan Murray makes the leap? Is this going to be the year that Keegan Murray shows that star potential that the Kings saw when they drafted him with a top pick? And now the question, I think, has transitioned to, and we'll just start right away with it, Chris. Is this the last year that Keegan has to show that potential? Because he just turned 25 years old. He's starting to enter the prime of his career. At some point, you got to show it. And while we've seen the fantastic growth in rebounding, the fantastic growth in defense, I don't think Keegan has shown any indication of the all-star status or capability that Monte McNair's front office, who is now gone, saw and talked about when they drafted him.
Yeah, I'm of the belief. I mean, it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing, right? Is Keegan Murray capable of taking that leap, or is Keegan Murray not been given the runway by the Kings to take that leap, given everything that's happened? And it's not. It's probably a boring answer. I think it's a combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
I think if Keegan was afforded more opportunity within the offense, if they, maintain sort of the same style of offense they played during his first 2 seasons with the dribble handoff game and not, slowing things down and having to adjust to DeMar DeRozan and then later Zach LaVine, I do think we would have seen more volume from Keegan Murray in the Kings offense, undoubtedly, right? The numbers took a pretty substantial step back, particularly in 3-point shooting last year. And to start off his career at 41% from 3 was super impressive. And if you look at, what rookies who had shot at that number, at that level, at that volume, how that sort of projected out to their careers, it was super promising. And I think that's what Monte McNair and Wes Wilcox were really impressed by with Keegan. Then it stagnated a little bit. There was a little bit of a sophomore slump, and then you bring in DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine, and you move away from the dribble handoff game, and you move on from other floor spacers like Kevin Huerter, and you ask Keegan to take on more of a defensive role and guarding, smaller players. It was just sort of this perfect storm that led to Keegan Murray sort of taking a step back in terms of the way we viewed him as a prospect. He went from being this untradeable future centerpiece to like what's restricted free agency going to look like next summer, right? Like it's a really intriguing situation that I feel like could go a bunch of different ways. So I don't know. I don't really know what to make of Keegan Murray. I don't have a great feel for his appetite to stay with the Kings long term. I feel like the Kings would absolutely like to keep Keegan Murray long term, but I'm sure there's a number that they have in mind that they would like to keep Keegan Murray at. And will he play beyond that number and go get an offer sheet from another team that's beyond what the Kings are willing to pay? It's an interesting question. It's an interesting dilemma. I mean, the Kings, for the Kings being in purgatory and being kind of having the ceiling of a first round exit team, there are a lot of moving parts this year, which will be interesting to track. It's not necessarily the season of interest in terms of how far will they go. It's what's interesting is who sticks around beyond this season. Who does Scott Perry view as a building block? Who wants to stay through Scott Perry's sort of reconstruction of the roster? And Keegan Murray is firmly a key character in that whole saga.
I'm going to lean a little bit into the media stirring up drama for no reason stereotype here, because everybody's been trying to figure out like who's to blame, what is to blame for Keegan not hitting that potential or not looking like he's had the opportunity to get that potential, and whether we want to blame DeMar DeRozan and now to some extent Zach LaVine because they have such a high volume, whether we want to blame Keegan Murray for having those games where he'll score 11 points in the first quarter and then take only 2 or 3 shots for the rest of the game and him not demanding the basketball enough, whether we want to blame Mike Brown for after his rookie year when he was a 3-point specialist, Mike wanted more in other areas and that kind of maybe broke Keegan a little bit or took him away from what he was good at. whatever. Like there's a million things I think we could throw out there as to why Keegan Murray has not reached that, especially offensive potential. And the correct answer is it's a combination of everything with circumstances changing. But if you were to lean into like one thing in particular that you think, I guess, most impacted Keegan's slower development, because again, we're talking offensively. He's grown in so many different areas as a basketball player that the Kings need. But when you're talking star potential in the NBA from a top pick, you're talking about someone on offense who can, specifically what we've always talked about with Keegan, create for themselves and score with the ball in their hands. And Keegan has never really gotten to that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that there's this interesting conversation with the Kings where if you mention throwing DeMar DeRozan into the mix, it sounds like you're blaming DeMar DeRozan.
Sure.
And you're not. It just goes to show that like the idea that DeMar DeRozan wasn't a great fit with Mike Brown's system and Mike Brown's team and the roster as it was constructed, I think certainly bore out. And what ended up happening was Keegan was one of the players who suffered from that fit not exactly working, right? It was very clear. The Kings offense had a very clear pecking order. And it was just everybody knew their role the first season. Beam Team 1, 22-23. And Keegan's role was certainly well established and easy for him to understand. And then it was, and I think it was probably likely that getting DeMar DeRozan was sort of emblematic of differing viewpoints between the coaching staff and the front office, right? Because what we know about Mike Brown now and what we know sort of about the way DeMar DeRozan plays, it's just not a natural fit. And I think there was square pegs, round holes on both sides when it comes to the coaching staff and the front office and DeMar DeRozan and trying to make everything work. And I think Kevin Huerter was on the wrong side of it. I think Keegan Murray was on the wrong side of it. And sometimes basketball fits just cause players to not be as efficient and as productive as they're used to being. And so, I think that's sort of, and I'm not blaming DeMar DeRozan.
Sure.
It's just that when you have, because DeMar DeRozan, one of the best closers in the league, Hall of Famer, like he helped the Kings win a ton of games last year, right? Like the Kings don't win. The Kings lose a lot more games without DeMar DeRozan and his ability to close last year. But that being said, in terms of the long-term outlook and the fit for Keegan Murray, I think his production certainly suffered. And Keegan doesn't have the personality that he's going to demand the ball from DeMar DeRozan, right? Like a future Hall of Famer who's, who wants to win as much as he can in these late stages of his career. So I'm of the mind that Keegan not being the most assertive personality is certainly a part of it, but the Kings messing around and basically, like they're the most successful teams in the league have run the same system for years and years and years, right? Like everybody is very comfortable within those systems. Everybody knows their roles, and Keegan's role and just kept changing. He had a different role in each of his first 3 seasons. And I think it's really hard to be adaptable in that scenario with multiple coaching staffs your first 3 seasons in the league. So that's sort of what I attribute it to. And because of all of this, I wonder, like, does Keegan want to stay? Like, I'm sure if the money's right, Keegan will absolutely stay. And I know Keegan likes Sacramento, and it's not about the market. It's not about the fan base. It's just like, given the fact that the organization seems to constantly be changing. And I know Scott Perry wants to maintain a level of consistency. Does Keegan want to see that through, or does Keegan want to go somewhere else where maybe he believes there's a better opportunity for him to flourish?
Well, I can tell you for a fact too, a lot of the people that Keegan was closest with are no longer here too. And that
was evident by the photos coming out at Keegan's wedding.
Yes. I mean, and so, and unfortunately last season, because this organization turned into a junior high school, things got relatively cliquey, and you could tell who was sitting together at each lunch table. And we knew kind of the De'Aaron Fox lunch table, and we knew the Domantas Sabonis lunch table. And De'Aaron Fox had Keegan sitting next to him. Keegan was De'Aaron Fox's right hand in many, many ways. And like we know, Doug Christie was sitting at the Domantas Sabonis lunch table. So all stuff that doesn't need to play a factor, but stuff that kind of reveals the storylines of how we got here, I suppose. This episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5 Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love most about 5 Hour Energy, it's how portable they are, right? You got big taste, but in a tiny shot that you can take anywhere and get the boost when you need it. I'll have one of those in my pocket and pop it when I'm in the middle of covering high school football that's going into late night, or just to get me through the end of my shift. I'll pop one if I need that energy for a podcast, right? Or if I'm on the golf course and need to pick up my round after a terrible front nine, which is pretty normal for me. There's so many different ways where 5 Hour Energy comes up clutch. So enough with the boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5 Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love, or be bold and try something new in store and online at www.5hourenergy.com. That's the number 5hourenergy.com, or you can order on Amazon today. When we talk about blaming DeMar DeRozan or Zach LaVine even for his stunt in development, people want to make that about DeMar DeRozan the person, when in reality what you have to look at is shot attempts. There's only one basketball, and obviously guys, like it's hard to share that ball. It's hard to get the amount of volume that every player both wants and needs to be effective. And all you have to see is that Keegan Murray played 1 more minute per game on average last season for the Kings, and his shot attempts dropped by 2 a game. And that's pretty significant. Like 2 shots a game doesn't seem like a lot, but for a everyday player who's supposed to be a consistent part of your offense, like that's concerning. I did a podcast earlier this offseason, Chris, where I was talking about Keegan, and essentially I threw out the question, and it's kind of a blunt, harsh, but simplified way to put it. Like, are you going to be a two-way high-level contributor, or are you not going to be? Because while Keegan can't control what the other 4 players on the court are doing, or what Doug Christie decides to do, or anything in the front office, he can't control how he asserts himself and how he gets involved. And Keegan is not the personality to go, give me the basketball, I'm shooting 20 times a game. That's never going to happen. But you're 25 years old now. You're entering kind of veteran status in the league. You're no longer the young kid anymore that's joined a playoff-bound team. Like, are you going to make yourself heard, or are you not? And I think that's a massive part of this upcoming season is, while DeMar's going to get his, LaVine's going to get his, Sabonis has to get his, like there is a pecking order. You can't just get lost in the shuffle. You have to assert yourself. And I want to see that from Keegan. And I think, to be honest with you, Scott Perry is looking for the exact same thing.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen with Scott Perry and just the way Scott Perry's looking at it this season is, we're just going to let the cream rise to the top. Like, I don't think Scott Perry is going into it like, all right, we have to, because DeMar is at this point in his career and is making this much money, he's got to get this, that, like, I think Scott Perry is open to a changing of that pecking order. Mm-hmm. And I think what a theme for this season is going to be from Scott Perry's perspective is who deserves to be here, or who are we building around? And if it falls into, the DeMar, Zach LaVine, Domantas pecking order, and Keegan isn't assertive, then I would imagine the Kings aren't going to be dying to give him, the same contract that that the Rockets just signed Jabari Smith. Yep. Yeah. Like so that's kind of the thing. It's like I do think what Scott Perry's intent is going into the season is to say, all right, we're like, we're not good enough to have this pecking order. We're not good enough to just default to DeMar and Zach and Domas every opportunity we can, because it's very clear that we know what that ceiling is, right? So there should be a vacuum for Keegan Murray to insert himself into, and from the standpoint of like, all right, maybe I will go get shots, or maybe I can move off the ball a little bit more and make myself available to teammates so they don't have to do the one-on-one thing in crunch time, which they so often do, right? And obviously how DeMar and Zach handle those situations, like do they give the ball to Keegan, like that's certainly a part of the dynamic. But it'll be interesting to see. Like, honestly, I don't envy Keegan. Like, this is a tough spot to be in. He's looking for his next contract. He's facing restricted free agency. He could sign a new deal and lock his best years in with the Kings, who have, obviously not been a model organization under any stretch for as long as he's been here, and going back, 2 decades now. So it's a tough spot for Keegan to be, because he can, even that, like, there's a scenario where Keegan becomes super assertive and demands the ball, and then that ends up clashing with DeMar and Zach. And then what's that look like? Like, is Keegan made out to be the bad guy for wanting to be more assertive, or are the Kings going to say, well, actually Keegan's more a part of our future, maybe we should curtail things to him a little bit? I don't know how all that's going to go. It's all up in the air. But one thing I do think is pretty clear is in Scott Perry's mind going into the season, he's saying, look, we're trying to give everybody an opportunity to earn their keep and earn their shots and earn their roles on the team. We are not beholden to anything, because if we were, we would be beholden to something that doesn't necessarily work in terms of contending. So I think Scott's going into it, clear-eyed and willing to allow Keegan that opportunity, but we'll have to see how it all shakes out, because there are a lot of personalities involved, a lot of moving parts, a lot of contractual stuff going on. So it's it's a complicated situation.
And another major part of it too is, how does first-time head coach Doug Christie handle everything, right? Domantas Sabonis shared with us at his basketball camp earlier this summer that Doug has already sent the team different elements of the offense to work on individually. So Doug wants to make his changes that you can't really make when you take over as an interim head coach in the middle of a season. But a concern that I have, Chris, and this is not for Doug specifically as much as it is, we've seen this before. Like, how do the Kings prevent, and how does Doug Christie prevent, with the other personalities / offensively gifted players that he has on this roster and in that starting lineup, how do the Kings prevent Keegan Murray from becoming essentially what Harrison Barnes was on offenses last year, which is a guy that just sits in the corner and gets ready to shoot threes? Because it feels like that's where we're headed. That's the easiest thing to do when you have a Zach LaVine and a DeMar DeRozan, who both need to eat and are probably going to try and play through Domantas Sabonis more. And whoever else is out there with him, Dennis Schroeder, is going to try and get downhill, play fast. Like, I just worry that someone's got to be the odd man out. That was clearly Harrison Barnes with Beam Team 1 and then year 2 of Beam Team 1. Now you have Keegan Murray that looks like he's, talk about square pegs, round holes. It seems like he's the peg that's going to get that spot.
I would agree. And, you look at Vivek Ranadive has not been somebody who's gone into the luxury tax. And going into 26-27, the Kings are about $35 million beneath the tax. And you look at what, Keon Ellis might be getting if you bring him back. You look at what Keegan Murray might be getting if you bring him back. I don't know. I guess that's probably around $50 million between those two guys. So then you're going into the luxury tax, but that's with DeMar DeRozan on the roster. So can you figure out a way to move on from DeMar this season? And I think that's kind of where this is headed. Like, if you're DeMar's not stupid. DeMar knows what the situation is. He knows that this isn't, he came to play with De'Aaron Fox and Mike Brown and Domantas Sabonis. Like, he came to elevate the Kings from a play-in team with those guys, with Fox specifically, and then, see if they can make a run in the playoffs while he's still got some juice left. Does he still view it the same way? Because I think DeMar sees it like the rest of us see it. Like, this is a rebuilding situation. And I think it's a very real possibility that come February or even sooner, the Kings realize, all right, it's time to trade DeMar.
Yep.
And what are the circumstances that a team is going to give you a draft pick for DeMar or a couple seconds or whatever, or is the situation bad to the point where you have to attach draft capital to move DeMar and his contract to another team? I guess it comes down to how well DeMar plays, and I would expect DeMar to play well. But it's just given the style of play that is proven to win in the league with versatility and defense and passing and rebounding, like DeMar is not of that era. So like it's not super, like if you're trading DeMar, you're probably trading him to a team that needs like 6-man scoring off the bench, right? Is DeMar going to be accepting of that? Does DeMar want to do that? Like, would DeMar want to do that with the Kings? That's another question. The point being, you look at the Kings luxury tax situation and the fact that Vivek Ranadive, I'm assuming, is not going to want to pay into the luxury tax for a team that's not a clear and obvious contender in the Western Conference. So you're not going to be able to pay Keegan Murray, Keon Ellis with DeMar DeRozan on the roster in 26-27. So are you able to move on from DeMar this season at the trade deadline? Does that allow you to sign Keon and Keegan? Do Keon and Keegan want to stay? Are the Kings showing those guys enough that, like, yeah, this is what the future looks like? This is your opportunity that we're presenting. Like, do those guys want to, are they going to embrace that? Or are they going to say, nah, I want to go somewhere else? Because I think it's very, very possible that both Keon and Keegan could say, yeah, like, cool, but I'm going to test the waters. And Keon's unrestricted. So Keon can go sign with anybody else. Keegan, it's a little more complicated because he's restricted. And we know through the Jonathan Kuminga craziness of this summer how wild restricted free agency can be. Not wild from the sense of like moving parts, but wild from the sense of like, wow, this market is super depressed. But there are going to be more teams with cap space next summer. So it's a difficult situation. But the one thing I feel pretty confident about is I don't think DeMar DeRozan, Keon Ellis, and Keegan Murray can all be on the Kings in 26-27. So the best way to ensure that you keep Keon and Keegan, which seemingly would be the priority, is to move on from DeMar. And that might be kind of a difficult proposition midway through the season.
This episode of Locked On Kings is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is there for you. Monarch does all the heavy lifting. You can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, and get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel like you're in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. That financial control is so important right now with inflation and interest rates and things like that. I don't know about you, but it's easy for things to unravel a little bit. Finances are, a lot of people are going through tough financial times. And while Monarch Money can't guarantee that everything is going to be great and is going to fix all of your problems, it's going to help give you a much better, more concise, informed way to attack those financial problems and come up with solutions. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNBA. Over the years, the conversation around a second contract for Keegan Murray in Sacramento always has been like guaranteed, in the sense that it's because of the front office that was here. With Monte McNair's front office being here, he was one of your major picks. Like it's going to happen eventually. And I still kind of feel that way, that it is going to happen, that Keegan Murray is going to get a contract extension. But the reason why I have that feeling, Chris, it has less to do with how Keegan performs, which you're 100% right. Scott Perry's using this entire season as evaluation for this roster and who fits this identity going forward and who doesn't. And I think Keegan does. And it has everything to do with, you look at this roster and you look at the height section and you see Keegan Murray 6'8", and then nothing else, right? So whether you want to call it job security or just horrendous roster construction that with a gaping hole that has not been addressed for years, Keegan's sitting there and the Kings are sitting there going, well, if we can't retain Keegan, if we don't want to bring him back, it's a wasteland at that position. And as we saw last season, over the last couple of seasons, the Kings put so much responsibility defensively on Keegan Murray. One, because he's one of the only few actual good defenders on this roster, and two, he's the only guy that's 6'8". So
yeah,
I mean, to me, as long as that is the case, regardless of what's going on, I think it's more than likely that Keegan Murray will remain a Sacramento King long term. I'm not saying that's a healthy way to get to make your decision to re-sign Keegan. I feel like Keegan's going to be a King. I feel very confident in that, and that's a major reason for it.
It makes sense. I do wonder if that's a little short term, like a short term way to look at it, because
I 100%
think,
agree.
Like, oh, we only have, in football, you see it all the time. It's like, oh, we have to draft an offensive lineman because we're weak along the offensive line or whatever. Well, it's like somebody could get injured in a practice and then your quote unquote needs completely change.
Right.
So like you could sign taller guys. Like if you want to remake your roster and add more size, you can do that. But yeah, long term, I think that definitely makes sense. I just keep going back to, like, Keegan's never going to tell us. We're never going to get Keegan to open up and have him like be critical of the organization and have him say whether or not he wants to be here long term. I would imagine at media day next week, Keegan's going to say, yeah, sure, I'd love to be here long term, because he's not programmed to say anything else. But I do wonder if Keegan's like, nah, I kind of want to see what's up. Like I kind of want to see where my value lies on the open market. Because Keegan if Keegan has a good season, even as just a 3-and-D guy, and even if his numbers don't increase dramatically, but if he shoots 38% from three and is at 15, 16 points a game and 5 to 8 rebounds and whatever, and just an efficient player, given his defensive versatility and how he fits in the modern NBA, I think he could have a pretty robust market. And I would be curious to see what his restricted free agency looks like. Or, are any of these guys going to demand trades? Like Keegan could have value on the trade market, right? And if you're Scott Perry and you're like, all right, Keegan signaled that he doesn't want to be here, instead of trying to figure out a sign and trade in the offseason, do we maybe move him at the deadline? If, I don't know, like, is Keegan's camp going to make that apparent to Scott Perry? I don't know, but I'm not ruling it out. And if anything, like, I can just never rule out fireworks with the Kings. So as much as it makes sense for the Kings to do everything they can to try to lock in Keegan Murray and move DeMar DeRozan and say, yeah, we're going to keep Keon and we're going to keep Keegan, like, that stuff makes sense. If you can get a valuable draft pick for Keegan and Keegan wants to go to one of these teams and, you can get draft capital. If you're Scott Perry, you're like, all right, draft capital is pretty enticing, particularly with some of the, the way some of these teams trade, like New Orleans, giving up an unprotected lottery pick to move up however many spots they did last year. Like, I never rule out stupid. So maybe the Kings can fleece somebody in a Keegan Murray trade. I'm never ruling that out. I'm not saying that's likely, but I'm just open to all scenarios with this, because I just don't know what equity the Kings have with some of these young guys. Like, sure, this is the only team you ever know, and sure, this organization took a chance on you, but there are 20 other 9 teams in the league. The vast majority of them are far more functional and have proven to be far more functional over the last few decades.
Let me add one more unnecessary firework to this conversation. Without the context of the season at all, and that context is going to be essential, but early doors right now, we don't have the context of this season. If you were in the Kings front office, whether you're Scott Perry yourself or you're advising Scott Perry, who is more of a priority long-term to extend? Is it Keegan or is it a Keon?
I guess it depends on what the number is for each of those guys.
Sure, of course.
Keon's an immensely valuable player because of the shooting and because of the defense. But is the playmaking there? Like, you look at the raw numbers and you can just look at the way, some of the moments that Keon's had defending Steph Curry. Like, Keegan can defend Steph, but we don't have those moments like the play-in game where like Keon is like putting Steph in clamps. Like, we don't, there aren't those types of defensive moments with Keegan. Keegan's a very capable defender, but I think Keon is kind of next level.
Yeah.
But I also think, given his size, that Keegan's probably more valuable.
Yeah.
Like, it's tough to say, because there are still moments. I'll never forget, covering the game in Boston against the Celtics. Jaylen Brown had no problem just going right at Keon. And the issue for Keon was just pure size. And Jaylen Brown was just like, yeah, this dude's an elite defender and has really good hands, but he's small for a 2-guard. And I'm just going to back him down and get to the block and turn around and get a bucket. And I think that Keon's size might limit him. Like, he's not a defender who can really defend up as much as he's just a combo guard who can defend ones and twos generally pretty well, but big wings, I think he's going to struggle with. So depending on what the number is, if you can get value in Keon, sure, absolutely. But I think Keegan, long term, given his size and the fact that he's a little bit more versatile defensively, albeit not as high end, I would say Keegan's probably the more valuable player, but I don't feel super strongly about that.
Finally, Chris, training camp starts a little bit over a week from now. Just give me a storyline that you've got your eye on, something that you're very curious about, whether you're going to ask questions or you're hoping to get a peek of when they let us into training camp at the end of practices. Just a storyline that has you intrigued about this team, or you want to explore further with the context of training camp coming up.
Yeah, you have a really difficult situation, I think, with all of the veteran players who understand that, that they understand the reality of the NBA, and they understand that you have a new GM and a first-time head coach. How bought in are these guys? Like, how, again, DeMar DeRozan isn't stupid, right? Like, is DeMar DeRozan just going to be a professional and try to win games, which is fine? Or is DeMar DeRozan like completely bought in? Like, we're winning a playoff series. I believe in my teammates. I believe in Scott. I believe in Doug. Like, there are different levels of buy-in. There's going through the motions as an NBA player and just playing basketball, versus committing everything you have to winning games and seeing the potential that a team has to, compete for however far or whatever goals they might set for themselves. I'm just interested to see what the buy-in is. And that's probably not going to be something that we get at Media Day, because Media Day is all first day of school and so excited, and
we're going to win a ship
camp. Yeah,
we're going to win a chip.
We're all in the best shape of our lives, and we hung out in the off season and blah, blah, blah. Like, when you lose 8 of 10 games in November and you're going on the road, and like you have back-to-backs and guys are in shooting slumps, and Doug Christie's changing his substitution patterns and shuffling up the rotation, like, is everyone going to be happy and willing to hear out a first-time head coach at that point? Like, can Doug Christie and Scott Perry keep things on the rails if they don't go swimmingly? What's that going to look like? Because it's going to, when you have a time like, what's the Littlefinger line from Game of Thrones? I know you're a Lord of the Rings guy, but chaos is a ladder, right? Like, if there's chaos, like, who's trying to climb the ladder? Who's trying to jump off the boat? What's that look like? Because I don't envy Doug, man. Doug has a really difficult, what Doug has going for him is the fact that he played, right? And he's so he can relate to the players on that level. But other than that, Doug is a first-time head coach who'll be navigating this really weird sort of transition period for the Kings. And you have established players who are not in transition phases and are like, I've been in the league for this long. I get this many shots. This is just what I'm used to. And like, I've been playing a lot longer than you've been coaching. So good luck telling me, what's what in this scenario. So I don't know. That's all kind of convoluted and wide ranging, but just, I guess, what's the level of buy-in with everybody? Is everybody gonna buy into whatever the Kings are selling, because this is a transition period and it's hard to buy into a transition period given that, the Kings might be trying to move off some of their key players?
Well, in addition to me taking advantage of Chris Biderman's time multiple times over the course of this season here on Locked On Kings, you can get his coverage of Sacramento Kings basketball with the Sacramento Bee. Chris is one that goes on the road a lot with the team, and where he'll get a lot of good information about the ins and outs and what's happening inside the locker room, not just on the court. So keep an eye out for that. Plus, if you're a San Francisco 49ers fan, the 3-0 Niners, check out Chris Biderman's coverage of the Niners over on the Candlestick Chronicles podcast that he has going on over there. Chris, appreciate you, my friend. I'll see you at Media Day, and let's get this circus started, I guess.
Yeah, I appreciate you, my friend. Thanks for the kind words.